Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I'm joined by Cash Nickerson. Cash is the chairman of AKKA North American Business Unit. He was the president, CFO, general counsel, and the second largest shareholder of PDS Tech prior to it being purchased by AKKA Technologies. And prior to that, he served as an attorney, marketing executive for Union Pacific Railroad, as a partner at Jenner & Block, and as chairman and CEO of an internet company. All that to say that he has done a lot of negotiating in his life, and he puts all of that experience into good practice now. He actually teaches negotiation and is the author of several books, including The 7 Tensions of Negotiation, which is what we dive into in detail in this conversation. I've covered negotiation on here a couple times. This was a very fresh perspective at this and offers a really tangible, usable framework for people, especially people who do not like negotiations. If you are somebody who says, I don't like conflict, I don't like negotiation, there's too much tension, then Cash is the guy for you, because that is what his book is about, the 7 tensions of negotiation. It's how to understand the tensions that we are feeling and then use other tensions to combat those and to drive towards the outcomes that we want. This was really fun. Applicable for everybody, whether you're in business or not. We are all negotiating things all of the time. This is very much a people business episode about just what it means to be a human and interact with other humans. I hope you enjoy it. Here is Cash Nickerson. Cash, welcome to the show. I'm excited for this conversation because I read your book and really, really enjoyed it, and am excited to learn today a little more about the 7 tensions of negotiation. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and chat it up about the 7 tensions.
So before we get into the 7 tensions, you talk in the book about this concept of positional negotiation versus principled negotiation. And I was wondering if you could maybe start there and just explain the difference between the two.
Yeah, so I need to explain it in historical terms and then explain what I don't like about the bifurcation. The concept really came home in the book Getting to Yes, written 40 years ago, translated into 40 languages, became somewhat the book on negotiation. And it distinguished and tried to contribute to the thought of negotiation. It distinguished between principled and positional negotiation. And what it said was, it said positional negotiation is bad. It's tug of war. People just fight and don't get anywhere, and it hurts relationships and all these horrible things about positional negotiation. And then posited that, principled negotiation, really is what you need to do. And principled negotiation was based on separating the people from the problem, with the implication that positional negotiation always involved tension just between people and positions. And they also said, look, just use objective criteria, try and find win-win scenarios with brainstorming. So these things were supposed to be like, if you just do that, you'll be fine. Positional negotiation, bad. Principled negotiation, that's what the enlightened do.
The moral high ground.
The moral high ground and the enlightened do. And, of course, the problem with that is that most negotiation doesn't necessarily have a win-win situation. There's a lot of distributive negotiation going on. Like I use the example of a candy bar. Unless somebody's going to say, hey, you know what? I've been looking for a wrapper. You take the candy bar, which is just so unrealistic. But you'll find this in the literature. You'll find it in Getting to Yes. They talk about an orange. And 2 kids want to split an orange, and they cut it in half, and later find out one wanted the peeling, like to bake a cake or something. I have surveyed over 1,000 children. Nobody's asked for the peeling yet. So it's a little out of touch with reality, but that was where the bifurcation kind of got set up, the dualism of you're either positional or you are principled.
Yeah. And I've found that just in my own negotiations, like I've tried to come up with creative solutions or get to the bottom line of what somebody really wants. And it's like, no, we want the same thing. And so we're haggling over the same thing.
Yeah.
So as I said before, I really enjoyed your book and just this framework of thinking about the 7 different tensions that can come in when you have a negotiation. Can you lay out just briefly what those are, and then we can maybe unpack some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to start with the relationship, because it's really contrast from like separate the people from the problem. The people are often integrally related to both the problem and the solution. So understanding the relationship, not saying, hey, let's just pretend we're playing chess and forget who I'm across from. That's so unrealistic. We always take into account who we're across from. Is it a friend, an enemy, a stranger, a daughter, a son, a child, a wife? We use relationship very heavily in terms of helping us decide what to do and how to go about sharing these things or resolving these disputes. So relationship, I always start with that. And then power. Power doesn't get much discussion in the literature, but power is a reality in terms of, what you may have that they don't have, what choices you may have. They do have a concept of a batten up, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Well, that's just one form of power. There's also psychological power. There's all different kinds of power. So power is an important thing to understand. What's your power relative to this person across from you? Are they your boss? Are they your subordinate? What's the power situation?
Is power the same as leverage?
I say yes. And for our purposes, yes. The ability to pick, let's say we're dealing with a Snickers bar and there's a plate and it has a little knife on it. The ability to pick up the knife, being, let's say, maybe the bigger person in very figurative ways. You do have the power to say, I'm taking the Snickers bar and I'm going to give you this much, like a parent-child. Mm-hmm. You've been eating too much candy. I'm going to give you this little piece. That's all you're going to get. So power and leverage, yes, very much the same.
Okay.
And then outcome. Like, how should this turn out? What do I have the right to expect? What do I expect? What do I want? Some of the most interesting dialogue in a negotiation comes from people coming into a situation thinking they know what they want, but really not having thought it through, right? And
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think the exploration of outcome, I like to say, write down what you think you want, then give it to somebody who will argue with you, and let them come at you about what outcome you want. Somebody thinks they want to buy company X. I want to buy this company. Okay, so what many people do is they set about helping the person buy the company. Let's take Elon Musk and Twitter a little bit, right? What did he want? His outcome was never clear. And sometimes he'll say he was trying to save the world, whatever. Well, there were other ways to save the world, as a shareholder, besides buying the company.
Yeah, spending $54 billion or whatever it was.
Exactly. And I don't care if you're worth $400 billion. Losing 20 still matters, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think you want? And I have a whole set of questions at the back of the book to help you kind of sort out outcome. But I think outcome is critical, and one of the biggest and most important things. Like, I'll give you an example. When we use intermediaries, and we'll talk about agents, if I'm not sure what I want, and the other side's not sure what they want, and then they put intermediaries in the room to get it, you can imagine what confusion really reigns. And then the results come out and nobody's really happy.
Yeah.
But that's because there wasn't outcome clarification early on. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Process is the fourth one for me. Process is a fascinating thing. How are we going to go about deciding how to share this thing of value? What are we going to do? Are we going to just split it in half? Are we going to explore potential other, outcomes? The more work you've done on outcomes, the more work you can do in sort of designing a process that might get you somewhere you didn't think you might get. So process is extremely important. And then timing. Is time a factor? You talk to great deal makers or people who have resolved disputes, and they talk about, hey, strike when the iron is hot. Timing is everything. Well, how much do we think about timing? And the other thing to think about time is how much all of these other tensions can change over time. Your power can change over time.
Yeah.
For Elon Musk, Twitter stock was at an attractive place. Tesla was at a record. NASDAQ was at a record. And that changed very rapidly in just several months. Tesla went way down, let's say from 400 to 260, and the NASDAQ went down and interest rates went up. And all of a sudden, the power to do the deal went down. And he rightfully said, I want out.
Mm-hmm.
But they held him to it. So timing. And then agent. Is this something you should do yourself, or is this something that you should enlist the help of someone else? And then finally, team. Are you accountable to anyone else? Your family? Some committee? Coworkers? Is there a accountability or support group that you deal with? So relationship, power, outcome, process, timing, agent, and team are the core 7 tensions that tend to arise in every negotiation.
I love that. Let's even pause for a second on the definition of negotiation. You kind of hinted at it, but where are we using these? Like, what's the definition of a negotiation that you like to think of when you think of where to apply these tensions?
Yeah, mine is very broad. So that if you look at a relationship, most everything you're doing is negotiating. Almost everything that comes out of your mouth is a negotiation. Anytime that there's conflict between you, something else, someone else, a conflict that can only be resolved by trying to work something out with the other side, in simplistic terms, it really starts with a conflict.
Okay.
We both want the same thing. We both want the same thing, which is why we feel tension, which is that's what generates tension is, I have to stop and say, can I have this? I have to stop and say, you want what from me? To me, conflict is core to a negotiation. And the greater the conflict, in many ways, the tougher the negotiation.
So is there a type of person that does better with negotiation? Like, I just think, there are some people who would say, I don't like tension. I don't like conflict. I'd do anything to avoid it. Is there a way that they can think about it differently, or are they just better hiring an agent and pushing the tension to the agent? Like, what are your thoughts around people who don't like tension, and what makes a good negotiator?
That's really, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
With regard
that was maybe 3 questions in one. Sorry.
Right, but it's okay. The truth is that people are different. The parameters are different. I tend to think of how people are different by actually looking at the 7 tensions, right? Mm-hmm. So that it's not a matter of being good or bad at negotiating. Is that most people have one of those 7 that they sort of fall back on, right? Mm. So if you like to avoid conflict, you may be someone who's more process oriented, so that the tension moves to the process instead of the people. You may be someone who will lean on the relationship, so that when things get hot and heated and you don't want the conflict, you say, well, hey, remember, I'm your father, or I'm your husband, I'm your wife, whatever. So people, it's not good or bad. People do think they're good or bad. The problem is when we give them a test to see, are you more cooperative? Are you more aggressive? I think everybody kind of answers questions as if they're like get along and find win-wins and stuff. People aren't necessarily truthful about how they really feel when we test them, right?
Yeah.
So the key, I think, and where the 7 tensions can help is you have an opportunity to use one of those tensions as your sort of core competency. People we think of as good at negotiation are often relationship negotiators. They're charismatic. They come in the room. They make you feel good. And, so you think, oh, they're so good at negotiating. But, it's interesting. The studies don't show those people getting the best results.
Interesting.
Yeah. The studies actually show a combination of what they call, black hat, white hat. Someone, in fact, there's an order to it. So having a team of someone who's like pretty aggressive and less likable, followed by someone who says, let me tell you what, I can explain what he's saying or what she's saying. As crazy as it sounds, as stupid as it sounds, bad cop, good cop is actually very effective.
Really does work.
It really does work. There's a reason that the cops and the FBI and all these law enforcement, they always say, that's it. You're going to jail and you're going to spend the next 20 years there and da-da-da-da-da. And then they leave the room. And then they say, hey, I'm sorry. He's having a bad day. Maybe we just talk, you and me, and we could probably work this out. So I do think the tensions can really help. Often engineers who are, let's say, very introverted sometimes, right? Jimmy Carter was an engineer. Okay, I like to contrast like him and like Trump, right? But Jimmy Carter was a total process negotiator. Number 4 in his class at the Naval Academy, studied nuclear physics. He was process. He had a way. He didn't come in and just say, well, everybody's going to like this Southern peanut farmer. That's not how he approached things. Reagan was very much a, relationship negotiator, and Trump's very much a relationship negotiator. People think of him as power, but you listen to him. Within 2 sentences of any conflict, he'll say, I have a great relationship with that person. I have a great relationship with it. Even when he threatens Canada and Mexico and says, hey, you know what? 100% tariffs if you don't do this and that. What's the first thing that happens? People come see him because they know.
Yeah,
he's a relationship guy. You got to sit down with him, work it out, as opposed to someone like Elon Musk, who is a pure power negotiator. He ignored everything else. Yeah, I'm buying your company tomorrow for this price. It's going to be public in the morning. Your shareholders will love it. That's it. Text. We know how people negotiate now so much because so much of it's done in social media and things that we can track. A lot used to happen in conference rooms, but now it's fairly visible.
So just to reflect back on you and make sure that I'm inferring correctly as I'm processing what you're saying. So if I'm somebody who really doesn't like relationship tension, I want everybody to be happy. I want us all to get along. I might think, well, I'm not a good negotiator because I just want to give in because I just want everybody to be happy.
Right.
Am I right then to think like the 7 tensions can be used to say, all right, I know that I'm going to cave if this becomes a relationship play. So how do I put some process in place? How do I put an agent in place? How do I rely on my team? If I know that that's the thing that's going to trigger me, I can now find 6 other potential strengths to come in or deploy that make the thing that I'm not good at or that I hate kind of irrelevant. Am I thinking about that the right way?
Beautiful. Absolutely. Okay. So you can see how it's helpful.
Which is so, I think it's so empowering for people who otherwise would say, well, I'm not a good negotiator.
Yes, precisely. You need to be honest with yourself and ask friends and watch yourself negotiate. You'll find you'll default to something. Somebody comes at you, we're going to do this by then, and I want this by Friday, and da-da-da-da-da. You see someone who is interested in the process will start asking questions. Well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to decide that? How are we going to? So people who are more introverted, who like to ask questions, can find a home in process, can find a home in agent. Get help. Great. Yeah. Get an agent so that you take the relationship out of the equation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Conflict avoidance. Yeah.
There's something to being able to blame somebody else in a negotiation that is really powerful. It's you told some stories about buying cars in the book, and I come from a car dealer family, so I was chuckling at some of those. But there is an element where, you'll hear a salesperson say, well, I got to go check with the manager. Well, our finance team won't let me do this. And it's kind of, they're both sort of putting themselves out there as the agent of the business. And then they're also kind of doing the black hat, white hat thing. Well, they wouldn't let me, but here's what I got them to do. You can kind of play both of those roles. And you see that happen a lot where somebody goes like, I wish I had the power, but I just don't. So being able to blame somebody else for not moving off your position can be strong.
Yeah, that's certainly the power of being an agent, and certainly the power of being part of a team. We can absolutely say, and that's why great negotiators don't want to negotiate unless they know they've got the person who could make a decision. Even if they're not in the room, are they available?
Mm-hmm.
Will you be able to call them? Can you get a hold of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the car, it's funny, whenever I speak about the seven tensions to a group, everybody hangs on every word when I talk about the cars because they've all been there. And they're all like, dang, I did that. I did absolutely everything they told me to do. As soon as I got there, they said, follow me, sit here. You become some kind of obedient, totally, perfectly obedient person when you want to buy a car. It's really quite funny.
Yeah. There's a lot of psychology that goes into car sales, which it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's funny. I talked to my dad about it, and it's a good thing that people have access to more information, that they can see whether cars were damaged. Like, all that stuff is great from a consumer basis. But my dad has lamented the fact that it's not quite as fun as it used to be when you would just come in and start haggling. You'd get people who really would come in and start haggling with you. And he's like, it was fun when you'd get somebody who was a good negotiator and they'd come in and you'd kind of mix it up, for the day or over the course of a couple days. He's like, it was a good time. So,
yeah, so many people have done it. It is a great model. But even with all the information, the power, the discipline, the cleansing yourself enough mentally to be willing to say, you know what, I'm leaving. It just doesn't happen that much. I've just surveyed so many people. It just is not, we don't feel comfortable with it because we want the car.
Yeah.
And we're convinced that we have to stick it out and do what the hell is to do, or we may not get that car we want.
Yeah. So how do we battle scarcity when we are faced with a negotiation? Because that's what one side is always trying to create scarcity in the other, right? Like, the seller is always trying to create scarcity that this thing I have might go away. And the other person's like, well, I really want that thing. So how do we battle that scarcity?
Yeah, that's power. And that goes right to the power tension. Who's got the power? Sometimes that scarcity is real and sometimes it's not. It goes to power and it goes to outcome. Must you really have this car? Is this the only SQ8 Audi in the city that's that color? And how important is that color? So the more flexible you are, let's say, on outcome, like there's 3 colors that would be okay. And the more you're willing to exercise the power you have, which is to take a time out, go look. You know what? Especially with cars. There's a lot of cars in the world nowadays. I mean, the last time I went to look for a car, and when I found what I wanted, I found out it was in Puerto Rico. And then I said, okay, that's I can adjust my outcome. I don't have to have that color, that year, etc. So scarcity can be a bluff, can be real, but that's on you to make sure that you've properly examined your outcome and make sure you've got the power choices.
Do you have any tips for that? I mean, I imagine you've done so many negotiations now that you're kind of programmed, you've flexed that muscle to say, look, I don't need this outcome. There's a bunch of ways I can get where I want to go. This is just one. Let's see if we can go do that. But for other people who haven't flexed that, they go to buy a house, they go to buy a car, there's something that they want, and it can be very hard to detach from that want. Do you have any recommendations for people who are early in their negotiating experience to just help them sort of reset that expectation and take more time?
It's an excellent question. It's like the old joke about, how somebody asking for, how do I get to Lincoln Center, whatever they say, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
You have to, I have had times when I've walked away when I didn't need to, and there was really just to practice it, just to get in the habit of exercising your power to leave. The last car deal I did, I went in, I saw the one, I wanted an Audi SQ8. I looked at the cars they had. They had a couple. And I talked to the guy long enough to get a sense, and then I just left. I said, listen, you know what? I don't like doing things in a dealership. And I did the entire deal by email from my house. And it's a totally different experience. So you just have to practice. Just do it, because it's like anything else. It's a muscle that you're exercising called free will.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Well, and for people listening too, like, it doesn't have to be the next time you buy a car. To Cash, your comment about negotiations are anytime you feel tension, anytime you want something from somebody or somebody wants something from you. So there are going to be plenty of low stakes opportunities where you want something and you start to have that conversation. They offer you, you go, you know what? On second thought, I don't really need that. You can practice it in low stakes environments too. You just got to be aware that you're negotiating all the time.
Exactly. You can absolutely practice in low stakes, but make sure you practice at some high stakes, because there's nothing like that feeling, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, practice is great, but now and then you got to like be on something big and just say, you know, I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
People are not used to saying no. We're so pressured because of relationship pressure and relationship tension to please other people.
Yeah.
You know? And so nobody wants to be thought of as a horrible person.
Yeah.
And we often associate unwillingness to compromise as like, ooh, that's an unreasonable person. But you can do it very politely. You can be very polite about it, and you can blame yourself. You know what? I wish I was more decisive right now, and I'm struggling with it. And that's it. When you feel it, how do you feel? As soon as you feel it in your gut, you should stop, because it's not necessarily right for you, and you need to share that feeling with the other side. This is where you can sort of flip the script. But the important thing is to not take it all on yourself. And that's what people who think they're bad negotiators tend to do. If you feel stress, and this is why I think it's so important that you get back in touch with your feeling of tension and acknowledge it. Don't ignore it. Okay, I'm feeling tension. What's not right? Am I being pushed on timing? Am I uncomfortable with this relationship? Is this not the outcome I want? Is this going down a process road I don't like? You know, what is bothering you? You got to stop long enough to size up. Oh, if it's timing, you know what? We may be able to do this. I need another week.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, because I feel like people are likely to check out or give in when they feel that tension, rather than see it as an opportunity to get to a better outcome. Like, oh, I'm feeling tension. That means there's something here. Let me figure out what that thing is, versus just being like, I feel tension. I don't like this. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. The tension often causes people to make suboptimal decisions. Because the one thing we know for sure about tension is that when we're under tension, we think less clearly.
Yeah.
And the more tension we're under, the less clearly we think. And so if you're feeling tension, you're not thinking so well.
Yeah.
Take a beat.
Well, I had an FBI hostage negotiator on here, Gary Nessner, was a fantastic conversation, but he made the point that emotion and rationality are a teeter-totter, and they both can't be high or low at the same time. So when you're feeling tension, that is an indication that your emotions are rising. And if your emotions are rising, you're not making smart enough decisions. So what I like about the framework that you lay out is you just accept the tension. And I think by accepting it and examining it, it lowers the emotional reaction to the tension and gives you a path forward so that you can be making those better decisions.
Yeah. Feeling it. Okay. Assessing it. And then cleansing yourself of it. You know, there's exercise you can do. Like, we carry a lot of tension in our neck and shoulders. You can breathe in with your nose and tense those muscles, and then breathe out and relax them. I have people do this at audiences, and I tell them, if you feel differently after we did this than you did at the beginning, you had tension. And every one of them says they had tension, right? Because it's become background noise for us. We accept it, and then it builds, and then we blow up. Sort of like, same with physical tension, pulling on a string until it snaps. Humans are exactly the same way.
Yeah. So I want to talk about outcomes a little bit. We've kind of already talked about it, but outcomes is basically, I want something, you want something, we're driving towards what we want, correct?
Yes, in that context, absolutely.
How else would you think about outcome tension?
Well, I think about outcome tension in terms of just a dispute.
Okay.
I think you did me wrong or whatever, and I want some kind of recognition, maybe recompense or something. But generally, yeah, outcome is something, let's say, that the tension goes away.
Yeah.
That's a good outcome.
When you get somebody who is just beating the outcome drum and they're trying to, I don't know, maybe there's some power involved, but somebody like, I could see outcome getting aggressive. If you're focused only on the outcome, I could see somebody just being aggressive and hammering away. How do we soften that if we're in a negotiation against somebody like that who's like, well, it's got to be this?
Yeah.
How do we start to change that conversation?
So I talk about 7 tensions, but sometimes some of them travel together, right? So power, timing, and outcome often travel together. I said, Elon Musk said, I'm buying this company, that's the outcome, for $54 a share, and I'm doing it tomorrow. So you can see the outcome, the power, and the timing working together. And initially, what we tend to do is we tend to sort of fight back with power. So Twitter, in that case, adopted a poison pill, which made it much harder to buy Twitter. That was their initial response. Oh, yeah? Well, we're going to, I think that particular poison pill said an additional 15% of stock would be issued to every existing shareholder. It makes the deal very uneconomic, right? And then they quickly retreated from that and started using, let's look at the other 4, right? Started using process and agent, right? And team. You think about, oh, wait a second. We're going to go get some lawyers. That's your agent. And we're going to sue. Okay. Litigation, whenever you see litigation, that's process. No matter who you are, no matter how powerful you are, at least in the United States, we got a judicial process. Mm-hmm. And that process takes over, right?
Yeah.
You can rail against it. Hey, you might get muted, but there's a process, and it tends to take away the power and the timing and the outcome. Puts it at a third party, but they put together a team with their shareholders. They got an agent, and they went right at the process. So I think that you often see the power, outcome, timing get countered with the remaining tensions.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, we'll throw some process at this. Yeah.
And in that case, so they threw agent and process at that, and then that changed the timing, which then lessened his power position. And so then, suddenly the deal kind of flipped, and it was much better for Twitter and their investors than it was for Elon.
You could see it really clearly, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it is. I think it's so easy to feel stuck when we have somebody coming at us like that. So having these frameworks to rely on can be super powerful. What does it look like when you are prepping a negotiation? Because we often think like a good negotiator is somebody who can just walk into a room and wing it and crush everybody. We see those examples on TV or movies where somebody just comes in and just like seemingly effortlessly just dominates everybody that they talk to all the time. But in your book, you talk a lot about preparation. And I'm a big believer in preparation, that anyone you see doing anything at a really, really high level, they are working their tails off at it. So what does preparation for a good negotiation look like?
Excellent question. I could walk into a room and appear like one of those guys that, walks into a room and just says, all right, here's how. I'd never do that. I walk in like Columbo. I mean, I spent, 20 plus years in Texas. I love to walk into a conference room and be like, hey, how y'all doing? Just little Texas accent takes off 20 IQ points. You want shields down when you come in to a room. If you walk in like Superman, you're going to face Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Because everybody's shields go up and you're not going to get anything. So I really have like a Columbo-esque kind of approach to negotiation. But in terms of the preparation, I will figure out who these people are in advance. I mean, we don't have 6 degrees separation anymore. We probably have 1 or 2 between LinkedIn and social media. You'll find somebody who knows that person. Find out everything you can about them, And I have a list of questions in the book. It says, here's a good questions to ask somebody who knows somebody to get a sense of how to handle it. And then I'll go through all 7 tensions. What outcome do I want? Let's say I want to ask somebody for a raise. Okay, that's the outcome I think I want. But instead, you know what? They can't do a raise, but they could do a bonus. They could do an extra week off. They could give me this new cool benefit, So I'll look at and make sure I've considered every outcome that might work for what do I really want, right? And then timing, thinking through timing, thinking through process. Am I going to try and do this in one meeting or multiple? Most things don't get resolved in one meeting. They just don't. So what's your sequence going to be? What's your approach going to be? How do the 7 tensions change over time? What could change? What if interest rates go up? What if interest rates go down? Taking a look at how time could affect all the other tensions. And definitely, do I need an agent? Should I have an agent? If I have an agent, how much power should I give them? Should they do exactly what I say, or should they have broad authority? Who on my team do I have to involve? Who from my team should be in the room? So much of how things work out is based on sort of who's in the room. So I think through every one of those things and I write them out, and I have like appendices in the book that say, hey, here's how to prepare. And then mid-negotiation, you should assess how are those things going. And then when the negotiation's over, how did that go? I require a preview and a review for any students I teach negotiation. They got to have a negotiation preparation sheet, and then they got to say what worked, what didn't, et cetera, so that you turn it into a learning experience so you actually get better and better and better at it.
Yeah. After action reviews are great. They're even better when you have a plan to reflect back on to say, did we execute that? What happened? What changed? Where did it work? Where didn't it work?
Yeah, it's the least fun part of negotiation. But in my opinion, the people who are best prepared win. End of story.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true in any area. You watch LeBron James walk onto a basketball court, it just seems effortless, right? But you watch any behind the scenes thing, and that guy works harder than just about anybody. Same with Tom Brady, right? In football, you see the same thing happen in business. You see the same thing happen all over the place. I've interviewed so many experts on here that it's become clear that the thing that they say all the time is you have to get your reps in. You have to do the work. You have to prepare.
It's absolutely true. It's not fun, but that's really what it's about. It's so true. If I walk into something and I'm calm, totally calm, I know I'm ready.
Yeah. To that point, it helps you get calm. The preparation helps you from getting triggered by the tensions when you're in the room because you've done the work.
Exactly.
This is what's happening here. I've seen this with myself. I just completed a race, fitness race type thing. It's called High Rocks. And I trained for about 4 months. And I had put a plan in place that I was going to build my training over time. And as I started to do it, I would push the workouts a little bit longer. And I'd be on the treadmill and I'd get, if I had done 3 rounds the week before, I did 4 rounds that week. And I would find the voices would start to creep in and tell me to quit. And the emotion would start to spike. And I would just be able to say to myself, no, this is the plan. This is where I'm supposed to be. It feels this way because I'm pushing a little bit farther than where I went before. This is why I'm here. Let's just put that aside. Let's get to the end of this thing and we'll keep going. And that little bit of preparation that I did helped me turn that emotion off when it started to creep in. Because when we get uncomfortable, whether it's physically or mentally, that's where the resistance kicks in and wants to get us out of that situation. And that preparation can really help.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's funny that you can experience it on the physical side and you can experience it on the mental side. Well,
I often use martial arts as an analogy for tension and for preparation and these kind of things. And it's really true. If you work with world champions, let's say in jiu-jitsu, and I've trained with a few of them, you can't feel them. They disappear. They're just that fine. You go to push something, it's gone. It's just hard to describe. But that's a level of, preparation. And I like what you're saying about self-talk, because your brain will say the dumbest things. I mean, you want to say, that's just my brain. Let's go on. I know what it really takes.
Yeah.
18 minutes a day or whatever for, get your proper hours in. It's just, there's nothing like it. There's repetition, commitment. Yeah. And then you wake up one day and you think, wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah. Well, I love Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. Have you ever read that book?
No, I haven't, but I'm going to.
It's a phenomenal kick in the pants to go out into the world and get done what you want to get done. And it talks about that voice, labels it the resistance with capital R, and about how we all have this part of ourself that will try to talk us down or trick us into not doing the things that we want to do. So anytime those voices creep in, it's probably because you're pushing for something meaningful that's beyond what you're used to. And that voice is a trigger that you're on the right path, but it's also a part of you that will try to derail you to keep you safe.
That's fascinating. I will read it.
Yeah, it's great. It's super quick read. Like some of the chapters are a page long. I want to dive back into some of the tactics here too, because you've said a couple things I want to pick apart. When is it a good idea to use leverage, and when is it a bad idea to use leverage? Because there can be some collateral damage to using leverage, I would think. So how should we think about when it's appropriate to drop the hammer with leverage and when that might not be appropriate?
Yeah, I think if we take this power, timing, outcome bundle, and then we look at the process, agent, relationship, team bundle, let's put those as separate bundles. You have to start with the relationship. And if using the power is going to hurt that relationship, take a merger and acquisition scenario. Let's say you're buying a company and you either need or don't need the people who are associated with the company. Generally, you need some of them, right?
Yeah.
And you may need all of them. It depends on whether it's a strategic acquisition or a financial acquisition or whatever. It becomes imperative that you take into account that there's going to be an ongoing relationship. And so I think relationship is kind of one of the things that really affects how and when and how much to use power. Simple example, I had a student who was selling a table and she sold it, but it was to another student. And her original plan was to say, they have to come and get it. But, and she thought, I'm going to see the student in the hall. I want to make it easy. So, you know what? I'm happy to deliver it, So
yeah.
I think power and relationship are very fascinating in terms of probably the biggest issue. How will it affect the relationship if you push too hard? Sometimes people will use power to test the relationship, right? It's like, will you take it or not take it? How much do you love me? But
that can be that can get unhealthy real quick.
That can get unhealthy real quickly, but it happens.
Yeah,
it happens.
For sure.
It's like people will test relationships using power. So, a power and outcome go together in terms of just make absolutely sure before you demand that I must have this, and you turn up the volume and you say, from my book, one of my favorites in relationship world is, Paul McCartney and Jane Asher, and Paul McCartney writing the song, We Can Work It Out. And it was really about him getting Jane Asher after they got engaged to follow him on the road. And he pushed an outcome, see it my way.
Yeah.
He said, try to see it my way, but it really wasn't sincere. It was see it my way.
Working it out was just her doing what he wanted. It wasn't working anything out together.
And he admitted it much later that it was very selfish of him. But it was this happy tune. We can work it out. But it was really a power move. And, she shortly thereafter went on the BBC and said, my relationship to Paul McCartney's off. He found out watching the BBC, Yeah. So people don't like to be manipulated. People do not like to be pushed and leverage. That's why power generally is a last resort. It should be a last resort. You should try everything else, but it should be a last resort, and it really has to be considered in relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. This might be related, it might not, but you had mentioned it earlier. How do you think about bluffing?
Yeah. Again, you have to kind of run bluffing in any scenario through those tensions. Like if you want to bluff somebody and you're going to have an ongoing relationship, it might affect whether they believe you in the future, right? So like you get away with it, but now I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at the context, right? And I wouldn't say never use it, right? But you just want to make sure you know the impact you're having on the other tensions when you do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because timing is a bluff that gets called all the time, right? So you say, hey, if I don't have it by Friday, it's worth nothing to me.
Yeah.
Friday rolls around, you still want it, it's Saturday. Okay, but only until Monday.
You're going to say no just because it's been a day?
But only until Monday, so you have to, I run through all the tensions when I think about a bluff strategy. How is it going to affect all those other things? I often will use an agent to bluff because that's easy. You know how lawyers, you blame the lawyers. It's like people do it all the time.
Yeah.
They said what? I didn't tell them to say that. So that's people use agents to bluff. Or if a team is in a room and, you might have one team member who trial balloons things.
Yeah. All right. Sort of related to that team concept. And you talk a little bit about this in the book. You share some stories where negotiations were stalled and you or somebody else went directly to somebody.
Right.
And there's a combination here of relationship and location. Sometimes you kind of tie in location to sharing physical space with somebody can help you work something out. When you get caught up in team negotiations, because there are so many of those that happen today, like I'm in sales for a living and I'm almost always selling to a committee. So there's always team dynamics happening in those rooms. What advice do you have for people to be able to cut through some of the malaise or like slowness that can happen with a team? And then how does, maybe as a second follow-up, is like, how does location tie into that?
Yeah, it's really excellent because most selling nowadays, at least at the enterprise level, you're going to face 5 or 6 people. You're going to face the user community, somebody who represents them, some kind of subject matter expert, potentially, a procurement person, some kind of compliance person or financial person. Procurement might be part of compliance. So you're going to face 4 or 5 people. And the key there really is making sure you know who's who, what their role is. I'm amazed that salespeople walk in without having done the research to know this is a financial person. Don't tell them how well the copier is going to work. Right?
Yeah.
This is the user. Don't sell them on the deal. They want it. They want this new tool, right?
Yeah.
So knowing who represents what, because they all have different roles and they're playing that role and they're going to be judged how they did by how well they played their role. Did they get a good price? Did they follow the procurement practices? Did they get the right equipment that would solve the problem the company has or the right solution? So that's the biggest mistake that I see when people negotiate in a team environment is they don't know the lay of the land. Do they know who has more power than who in those scenarios? Does the user seem to have the power? And you can tell by kind of like who's asking the questions, who's running that show. So much is listening, paying attention, looking at behavior, who sits where.
Yeah.
Right? I may know all the roles, I may know all the people, but who defers to who?
Yeah, well, I've read a bunch of accounts from Iraq and Afghanistan from those wars, and I was not there, but I've read a lot about them. And oftentimes I've heard stories where troops would go into a village and they would start negotiating and talking with the local leader, only to find out that it was the quiet one who was sitting behind them who was actually making all the decisions. The person that they presented was more of the agent than the actual decision maker. And so figuring out the dynamics of the group was really, really powerful in those cases, as it is in every case. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, again, knowing a culture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cultural awareness.
Yeah. Let me ask this a little differently too, because I can see, like, maybe this is just for me, but there are times where you're talking with a team of people and you're like, God, I wish I could just go to this person and have this direct conversation. But there can be fear that you don't want to do an end around the rest of the team. You don't want them to feel slighted. Maybe they can throw the deal off if they find out that you went to their boss. Like, how do you know when it's appropriate to just pick up the phone and kind of come over the top on somebody and have that conversation?
That's an excellent question. And do you remember The Godfather when
Sure.
they're having a sit down with the guy who wants them to peddle drugs for him?
Yeah.
And the kid speaks up, and the father just rebukes him afterwards. Don't you ever speak out and let anybody know what you're thinking. And ultimately that led to everybody getting shot and in trouble because he sounded like he was open to it. He gave off a little buying signal. It was the James Caan character. So it can have horrible consequences. It's interesting. People love little like secrets and little like offhand remarks. People often pay close attention to what people say, but often what they mutter under their breath is what's really interesting. I was negotiating a deal with a major bank, and there was a whole team in there, and he was one of them. But he said to me at one point, he said, "Hey, come with us. You'll never look back." And I was like, wow, I was interviewing different banks. But when he said that, I thought that was an invitation to reach out to him, which I did. And then he and I had a drink, and it progressed the whole loan deal, which was a major, big line of credit. But see, he hinted at me like, hey, that he
was open.
He's someone he was open to it, and he's someone who could be approached, and we did. So, it's dangerous. But so when it happens, it's a beautiful thing. It's a back channel type of communication.
And so then the last part of that question, I've asked you a lot of multi-part questions today. I apologize. Was location. So in a world that is increasingly digital, how should we think about location when it comes to negotiation?
It's very, very good question and very interesting. They're just now, I'm starting to see some good studies on like Zoom versus in person. And in the one that I think I mentioned in the book, it's fascinating. There's less creativity when people are on Zoom, and it was substantial. So the face to face and getting that. So if you're facing a negotiation where you need to come up with some creative solutions, to have people try and do that on Zoom is not as effective as face to face. There was some evidence that if you were trying to narrow things down, that Zoom could be superior, because think about it, it actually narrows your focus and scope. But absolutely, deal making, dispute resolution requires a lot of creativity. You got to be thinking about different outcomes. You got to think about different places, ways to get there. So I prefer face to face, and you can shake people up. I was negotiating an employment dispute for somebody, and it was the plaintiff's lawyers were in Chicago. And I was in Dallas, and I said to him, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago visiting my daughter. Maybe I'll stop by. They freaked out. They're like Gen, whatever they are, 10. It was like, you mean like in person? And it was like, whoa, that's frightening. And I said, yeah, let's get together, So there's some generational differences. There's some advancement of tech, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why business travel is now exceeding what it was before.
Yeah.
Yeah, because look, we could do everything by Zoom, but it's not the same.
Well, there's a reason this show is called People Business.
So you got it.
Yeah. So I know we're running out of time. I got one more question though, because this was interesting. You made the comment kind of quickly in the book, and I think it might be worth unpacking a little more. you said always have the other party make the decision.
Yeah. I have them make the hard decision. The next goes with, if you feel tension, you should share that. It's not fair for you to hog all the tension because you should share it. It's like, if you feel the tension, you have to figure out how to give it to the other person, and that can come a variety of ways. Like I said, I remember my partner and I went to get a couple company cars at a Porsche dealership, and I just remember we were pretty good together, and we were talking to this salesperson. It wasn't going the way we wanted. We said what we wanted. Brian, two of them, we wanted this kind of discount. And we were like a little frustrated and a little tense. And we looked at each other and said, we're out of here. And we left. But, we hung around our cars out in the parking lot just for a few minutes. And sure enough, the manager came running out. Hey, where are you guys going? Where are you going? What happened? Oh, it's okay. You guys must sell lots of cars. You don't need our cars. You don't need to sell us cars. We talked to your sales. Oh, well, come back in. Come back in. We might be able to get to your number. I said, nah, we're fine. We're good where we are. Now we're relaxed. Nah, we're good. We're fine.
Yeah.
He went and wrote up our deal and brought it out to us. And with that guy, we did many more deals over the years because it's like he would bring them to our office. We no longer had to play the game. So, and this could be especially helpful. Like I've negotiated with a few kids of billionaires.
Interesting.
Now, there's someone who feels pressure to show their father how good they are because, hey, think about the shadow of that, right? Imagine. So I always, with them, will make them feel like they won. So I'll plan the back and forth so that they will get the last word. They'll be able to say something to me like, and not a penny more. I want them to say that.
Yeah.
And then I have to relent, But in reality, hey, I got the deal exactly as I wanted it. But he gets to go home to his father and say, I told him.
Yeah.
And not a penny more. So, there's this sharing of tension. Don't just eat it yourself.
Yeah. I remember back to my dad, one of the first. So when I was 18, he had me come in and start selling cars for him. And I was just finished my freshman year of college. So maybe I was 19. And one of the first couples that walked in, I think it maybe even been the first sale I'd ever made. They were like, well, we want to pay this. And I said, well, I have to go talk to the manager, who was my father, whose name was on the building, which I did because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I went in and I sat down. And he said, they'll take the car for this amount of money. And he goes, sure, we'll do that. Like right off the bat was like, yeah, go ahead. And so I went to stand up to leave. And he goes, no, sit back down. And he goes, actually, go get Charlie, who was the sales manager at the time. He said, have him come in here. So I went and got Charlie. He came in and he sat down. And he said, I want you guys both to sit down. He said, we're teaching O'Brien a lesson. He said, he could go back and we'll do the deal, right now. But it was so quick that they're always going to wonder, could I have gotten a better deal? And maybe they're not going to enjoy that car as much. We're going to sit in here for 5 minutes. Then he's going to go back and he's going to do the same deal. And they're going to walk out of here and they're going to be thrilled that they happened to get the owner's son and he got him this great deal. And it wasn't in a sleazy way of like, we're going to take advantage of this person. It was just, we're going to make sure that they feel good about the deal that they got. And that was the number they wanted. We were willing to accept it. It wasn't like we were pushing them to do something they didn't want to do. It was just, we're going to make sure that not only do we get the money, but they also get the experience. And I thought that was such a powerful lesson as like my first sale ever.
I love that story because you could negotiate in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul because, at the end of the day, happiness is very subjective. And your father was genius. He knew those people needed to be happy.
Yeah.
And all you did was craft a plan on how they could be happy. Yeah. Because if people are happy, like this, what I learned in Istanbul at the Grand Market, it was like, wow, guess what? Somebody who pays $1,000 for a scarf could be happier that they paid the $1,000 because that means it's an incredible scarf from Turkey. And when they give it to me, they say it's $1,000 scarf. They're happy. Somebody else who paid $150 for it thinks, I got this great deal on this scarf from Turkey, from Istanbul, from the bazaar. And both those people are equally happy. So is there a right answer on negotiation, right?
Yeah.
Your dad, this is beautiful. That's a beautiful story, because it's about, at the end of the day, the relationship, because if they're happy, they're going to come back. They're a customer forever. They're going to tell 50 people about how they successfully haggled. My mother shopped at JCPenney. JCPenney was known for sales and stuff, and she would always tell everybody, I got 30% off this. I got 20%. I got 40%. I got this on clearance. Then those poor people came in from Apple, the guy who ran Apple stores, and took away all the sales, and Penny's went bankrupt. But it's just like, you didn't understand. The customers want to feel. They want to feel like
a certain way.
They got to feel a certain way.
Well, it's back to the fact that we're all humans, and while it may be like we may think, no, we got to get to the best deal, it's we got to get to the deal that we all feel good about.
Exactly. That's a fantastic attitude.
Yeah. Cash, as I said at the beginning, I loved your book. I think it's great for anybody out there, even if you're not in heavy negotiations all the time. Your Istanbul story, Istanbul's on my bucket list of places to go, and your Grand Bazaar stories, I was like, oh man, I got to go there and try this now. So really appreciate you coming on the show. I hope anybody who needs help with negotiations will go pick up the book and or reach out to Cash directly.
Don't suffer in silence. Feel the tension, assess it, cleanse yourself of it so you think clearly, and then execute on a plan around the 7 tensions. You'll be fine.
Love it. Good luck out there, everybody. Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.